Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the candidate forum for the 39th seat of the State Senate here in Kansas. I'm Mark Hine, Government Affairs Committee Chairman and Board Member for the Garden City Area Chamber of Commerce. To my immediate right is Steve Dyer, President of the Chamber, who will be the timekeeper for tonight. This forum again tonight is for the Kansas District 39th seat. Each candidate will have 5 minutes for opening statements. A coin was flipped before we started to determine who gave opening statements first. Following the opening statements, candidates will be asked questions prepared by the Chamber Government Affairs Committee, members of the Chamber, local media, and the community. If time permits, questions from the audience will be asked. If you have a question, please raise your hand and someone will provide you a card to write your question. Those questions will be handed to the moderator. Candidates will have no more than 2 minutes to answer each question. Candidates will be notified when there are 30 seconds left for their answer. Candidates will take turns answering questions. The forum will wrap up with a 3-minute closing from each candidate. We'd like to thank the City of Garden City for providing the venue for tonight's forum. It is also live on the City of Garden City Local Channel 8. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. Representative Dahl, opening statement.
Well, thanks to the Garden City Chamber for hosting this forum. It's important that we have a constituency that's well informed, and Mark, thanks for agreeing to moderate this. You know, this election we have coming up in 2017 is probably one of the most important elections that we've had in state government for some time. You know, we're in trouble financially. I mean, that's just as simple as it is. And one of the things that probably the biggest issue that we have coming up in 17 is the budget. You know, every odd year is a budget year. And we're working on a deficit right now, which isn't good for state government. We've been borrowing money, bonds that not only will we be paying for immediately, but our children and our grandchildren will be paying for what we are experiencing right now. We've had harmful cuts. You know, another area that's just critically important is education. You know, when somebody thinks of education, they think just K through 12, but you know, we have early child development, and we have a tobacco settlement that funded the Children's Initiative Fund, and it's vitally important. They've been trying to sweep that in to help make the budget balance, and we have to leave the tobacco settlement alone for early child development. That's so critical for children. K through 12, we are going to be writing a new school formula. You know, the block grant was ruled unconstitutional. It's very important that we have someone who has educational experience from rural America that's sitting at the table helping formulate this new formula. And then we have post-secondary education. Post-secondary education, you know, we've raised tuition. All the schools and regions were forced to raise tuition. We have made cuts in all our region schools, 4% just recently. It's so important that we have an educated workforce. You know, the governor brought in this tax plan to bring in more businesses, and you know, he won 2 elections on that. So we're not going to sit here and that's what the Kansas people wanted. But you know, I think more businesses come here for the, you know, for the educated workforce and also for infrastructure, and that brings us to highways. You know, right now we had the 3rd best highway system in the United States. Just as recent as 3 years ago, it was 2nd best. But we keep taking money out of KDOT. There's no more money in KDOT, and consequently, our highway systems are going to crumble more and more and more. For Western Kansas, rural America, everywhere, but especially for us out here being an ag community, it's so important that our highway system's good. Healthcare, you know, we've cut Medicaid 4%. It's making so we have we're forcing caregivers. They won't take Medicaid patients because they just don't get reimbursed. And when they get reimbursed, it takes a long time for them to get reimbursed. So what happens is people who wants to treat their kid and has Medicaid, they're forced to go to the emergency room. That forces all insurance to go up. You know, we have to take a long look at Medicaid expansion. I'm not sure if that's the route to go, but Medicaid expansion deserves a hearing in both houses, you know, to see whether it's right or wrong. All our CEOs throughout the 39th district believe that Medicaid expansion is the answer. Our hospitals are very much in danger of closing, not necessarily Garden City or health, critical care centers, but a lot of the hospitals like Elkhart, Syracuse it's not a matter. If they'll close, we don't expand Medicaid, it's when they will close. And then finally, we need to have a tax system that's a fair tax system. You know, the three-legged stool worked for Kansas for some time, and we have taken the three-legged stool out and replaced it with a two-legged stool, and it hasn't worked out for us so well. In defense of the governor, you know, we've gone through a bad recession. Commodity prices are down, cattle prices are down, airline industry has been in the tank. But the problem I have with the governor is that, you know, we didn't make adjustments when those things happened. Perhaps if our economy was robust, maybe this tax plan would have worked, but it hasn't worked. It's obvious. All economic indicators that we have shown that it's not working. You know, we've turned away, if we'd have kept the same tax bill as we had in 2012, we would have had an additional $2 billion, so the recession that we are having in Kansas right now wouldn't have been so drastic.
Tom?
Mr. Worf, your opening statement.
I didn't join this race because I had dreams of being senator. I didn't join this race because I want to be a politician. In fact, the people who truly want these political offices might have their motives called into question. It's not an overly interesting field. It doesn't pay an exuberant amount. In fact, from what I've been told, the senator of the 39th district will make approximately, after per diems, $30,000. But there are people in our community, probably even in this room, who upon hearing $30,000 think, wow, $30,000 a year could change the life of me and my family. But there are also people in this room who think the exact opposite and think, wow, $30,000 a year, my family would never survive. So why do people want to run for these positions? For some, it's a position of power, and that can be attractive. My name is Zach Worf, and I'm 31 years old. I was born and raised right here in Southwest Kansas. I've only left long enough to learn how great of an area it truly is. I am very active in our community. I have done things from being a docent for our zoo to many theatrical productions, and back in December I took on the chairmanship for the Finney County Democrats. I do all this while raising my family back in Holcomb with a very, very, very tolerant wife, Rachel. While I was growing up, we always referred to Garden City as the black hole because it always brought you back. We thought it was cursed, and it wasn't until I became an adult that I realized it always brought us back not because it was cursed, but because it was blessed. We had an economy that was recession-proof. We grew while everybody else struggled. Since then, though, we have seen wages become stagnant. We have little, if any, housing growth. Property taxes have skyrocketed. We continue to refuse to expand CanCare, a program that, if implemented, would give 2,000 of the 6,000 people in Finney County that don't have any insurance something to fall back on. So when one of them go to the hospital and they can't pay their bill, that is put onto your property taxes. And then you have to read in the newspaper that this is a topic that isn't even allowed to be discussed on our Senate floor. Which brings me back to why I'm running for state office. It's not the job I want to have, but I can't just sit around and yell at the 5 o'clock news anymore. I'm going to do something about it. You can't do that with somebody who wants to make their rich friends a little richer, and that's what happened with our current administration. We put people in office who took a state that was in fantastic financial status and conducted an experiment. We have business owners in Southwest Kansas asking to be taxed. They want to support the communities that support them. They can't do that while the fat cats want to be a little bit fatter. It doesn't take a master economist to understand that if we give large tax breaks to somebody who already has a lot of money, they're going to put that money into savings accounts. And as we learned this summer with the Panama Papers, those savings accounts might not be based in our country, so no taxes will ever be paid. Now, if you gave that same break to a common blue-collar worker, a 9-to-5er, well, let's be honest, today it's more like a 9-to-9er. They're going to spend that money in their community. You're going to see businesses have increased product going out the door. You're going to see more money being spent within the community. and causing the job creators to have to hire more workers, increasing their wages, and it becomes a continuous cycle from there. Now, that is a very simplified way of describing our current situation, I know. But my point is this. On the news, they always refer to these elected positions as our leaders, and the person who holds that spot may very well be a leader in their community. In fact, there was once a time where that was one of the key reasons we chose them for those roles. But as your senator, they are not a leader, they are a representative. They are representative to the area in which they came. That is important to remember, because as a leader, I did it with integrity and respect of the people under me, and I would do the same as your representative as senator. Whenever I do one of these speaking events, I always wear my Spider-Man tie clip, and I do that for a specific reason, not only because I enjoy a comic book from time to time, but I also do this because John and I are running for a position of entrusted power, and it's never been more important to remember that with great power comes great responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Warfel, we'll start with you with the first two questions within it. Have income tax cuts of 2012 and 2013 produced the desired results in Kansas? Should farmers and other business owners in Kansas be exempt from paying income taxes?
You know, I understand what the idea was behind the tax cuts of 2012. I understand how they thought that would work. It would attract more businesses to Kansas. They thought that lack of taxes would be attractive to big business in Kansas. Unfortunately, what happened was we were hit with struggling prices in the oil field, the cattle industry, farming market, and so we didn't have our own taxes to fall back on. And because as a result of that struggle at that time, no businesses really came in either. So it backfired completely. If you continue to require people that are struggling, businesses that are struggling, if you continue to give them the tax cuts, they're just going to squirrel it away for a rainy day, and that's what happened. We didn't see an increase in job growth. We did not see an increase in businesses coming to Kansas. So no, it didn't work. If we go back to what it was and maybe as a counter offer higher wages to our employees, they will spend that extra money within their community and creating more job growth, as I said earlier.
Thank you. Representative Knoll.
First, I have to address a couple of issues. Garden City and Finney County have done a wonderful job of keeping property taxes down. In fact, Garden City has the third lowest of Class A cities of keeping property tax down. In the last 7-8 years, I can't recall, but a very slight increase from either the county officials or the city county officials of increasing property tax. Secondly, we've had 3 huge housing developments in Garden City. We just broke ground on the senior center housing, but so I needed to approach that. The income tax issue obviously hasn't worked. It was an experiment, and there again, the governor won 2 elections on this plan. My problem with the governor is because we are in a recession. You know, it has not worked. He needed to take it off, put it in the top drawer, and if our economy turned around, maybe give it another shot. But obviously, it's not worked. As far as farmers their income being exempt, their income tax, you know, that's a double-edged sword. If they have to, you know, right now, the farmers are having a tough go. Commodity prices are way down. Implements are way up, you know, to cost of equipment. If they have to raise that, in order for a farmer to make a living, the price of our foods that in the store and everything would have to skyrocket in order for them to be able to, you know, for the farmers to make it, prices would have to go up in order to pay the farmer. So, yeah, I think farmers in a lot of areas should be exempt from tax, income tax. They were before 2012. And I think we need to revisit the 2012 tax income plan of the governors.
Thank you. Next question, Representative Dahl, we'll start with you. Tax revenue continues to be worse than projected. What should the legislature do in the next session to reverse a trend that's resulted in sharp cuts in state funding for programs across the board?
Well, there again, because our revenue stream lot of the will of some of our legislators up there is to cut our way out of it. It's impossible. We're cutting into the red meat now. You know, we need to make government run as efficient as we can, make every dollar stretch, that there's no waste in any money to spend. I think that we're there. It's obvious that we need to readdress the 2012 tax plan and put a third leg stool in, at least for the time being. We would have been, if we had kept a 2012 tax plan right now, through the time that it's been implemented today, we've brought in over $2 billion more money than we have right now. That would have taken a lot of the burden off, that the cuts like in special ed, cuts in our early child development, our cuts in secondary and post-secondary schools. You know, we have to readdress the income tax.
Thank you. Mr. Ward.
Will you review the question for me?
Tax revenue continues to be worse than projected. What should the legislature do in the next session to reverse a trend that's resulted in sharp cuts in state funding for programs across the board?
Well, the first thing we have to do is, like John said, put the tax revenue back to where it was back in 2012. The program was fine at the time, and it would have continued to be fine. But even if we did that tomorrow, it's not going to change the fact that we have a massive deficit as a result of the cuts. And we would have to look at extreme ways to bring that revenue back into not only Finney County, not only the 39th district, back into Kansas as a state. And I would suggest we do that by taking a feather from the hat of our neighbor and looking at the cash crop that they have brought in. Colorado implemented their marijuana reform, and as a ag state, I don't see any reason why we would not want to cash in on what they have been doing. They've paid for their school system to the point that the school said, we're good, we don't need anymore. They paid for, they're now feeding their homeless with it. They have given their state citizens essentially a tax return because of all the money that was spent. It's helped their state immensely, and I think it would do great things for our state to look at the same thing. Eventually we would get to a point where industrial hemp would be introduced, and that's a cash crop for our farmers that would be very affordable to grow, use a low amount of water, and have an extremely high yield.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf, we'll start with you in the next question. Funding for the K through 12 public schools has been an ongoing issue. What should the state do regarding a new school funding plan?
You know, we always talk about if we give the schools enough money. It's not a question about whether we give the schools enough money. We don't. And it's because we look at the schools as something we have to spend money on instead of looking at it as something we invest money into. We invest into our educators and in turn invest into our children. And when we talked about, we wanted these tax cuts to bring new businesses in, but business owners don't always look at just the taxes. I'm sure that's something that's absolutely considered, but they look at, I'm going to be bringing my family to this town. What kind of education are they willing to offer? Are they willing to fix a pothole that's in their road? The way a town takes care of itself and the way its state takes care of itself is what's attractive to these business owners, not solely the taxes that they will save. When you consider just that, you're going to have big businesses come in like Walmart and corporations like that, where the owners are never going to live in our state. They're probably never even going to visit our state. And so then, yeah, they're going to absolutely take advantage of the lack of taxes. But it's not going to be a benefit to the community.
Thank you. Representative Galt.
We have a moral, constitutional obligation, a historical obligation for education. Education is a premise of the United States of America from the time of our founding fathers. John Adams was very specific, that he wanted public school education. The courts are kind of telling us that we're going to have to spend more money, and so we may not have a choice. That case will probably come in about right after the election, and I think it's going to show that we're going to have to divvy up some money. And What's scary is I'm not sure where that money's going to come from. It's, to have an educated workforce is a foundation of the state. That's what's going to bring in businesses, that's what's going to bring in people, that's what's, but, you know, the reality is, you know, they asked us, I've heard numbers from $500 to $800 million that are going to have to be brought in. You know, it scares me to figure out where that money's going to come from. But one of the things dealing with this education, K through 12, that bothers me somewhat is that there's a big push to put private vouchers and private schools, and for kids that are homeschooled or go to private schools, you get the same amount of money, public money, that goes to public school students. And that's a scary thought, because we have a moral obligation to fund public education. We don't have to fund private education.
Thank you. I want to remind the folks in the audience, if you have a question, please raise your hand. We'll get a note card to you, and you can write that question down. We can get it up here. Representative Dahl, I'll start with you on this one. The state has seen unprecedented diversions of Kansas Department of Transportation funds to address large budget shortfalls. Knowing good roads are essential for economic growth and stability in southwest Kansas, what will you do to ensure your district and region are in line for adequate road maintenance and improvements?
The only pot that they have not emptied out right now is a constitutional right, the gas tax. It cannot go anywhere but to roads right now. That's the only pot that they have any money left. We have taken every bit of money that we can take from KDOT. You know, and we won't feel the effects of that this year. Probably we won't feel the effects. We'll start feeling a little bit next year. But the traffic that we have in western Kansas with, you know, wind energy and those sort of things, when the dairy plant come in and we'll have all those dairy trucks, we will feel the impact in the 39th Senate District faster than a lot of people will. You know, they have adequate funding. If we put the funding that's supposed to go there and leave it alone. But unfortunately, because of the dire straits that we are financially or economically, our budget is, we have to take money from there. There again, it all goes back to the budget. I think why we are in this recession, for the time being, we need to reinstitute the tax plan in 2012, and then that will allow the KDOT money to stay there. They have enough money if we don't steal from them. So my answer is, there again, the 2012 tax plan.
We're beating a dead horse on it. We've got to put the tax plan back. It's a no-brainer. And you know, when the primary happened back in August, it became extremely clear that even the people of Finney County in the 39th district saw that we have to put the tax plan back, and that's why we did not re-elect our incumbent. We said we can't do that anymore. It's not working, and everything that he spoke about showed that he had no intention of changing any of it. And so the people spoke. The people have overwhelmingly said, we have to put the tax plan back. We have to move on from Brownback and his plan. We have to look at some of the other states. There are plenty of states in America that are not struggling like we are. We need to learn from their lessons. We need to speak to their governors and see what they're doing. The money is there. There's enough pie for everybody at the end of the day. We just had people in our administrations want more pie for themselves than everybody else. And so by putting things back to the way they were, implementing other programs like I spoke about earlier, we will see the growth come back. We will see the jobs come back. We will see our education come back, and we will start working on our infrastructure and put it back to where it was.
Thank you. Commissioner Ward, for the next question here. Hospital officials have expressed a need for Medicaid expansion to see more than 150,000 working poor Kansans covered. Kansas also has lost more than $1 billion in federal funds that could help struggling rural hospitals. What is your opinion of Medicaid expansion? It's
a no-brainer. We absolutely have to expand it. there is no obligation for us to keep it once we have it, should the funding go away. So we've simply missed out on $1.2 billion. And that number's not gonna go down. It's still getting passed to our taxpayers. It's still causing our small town hospitals to struggle. And we're talking about people's lives. Nobody should have to wonder if they can go to the hospital or not. If you need a doctor. I mean, we are one of the richest nations in the world, and most other first world countries have some form of a universal healthcare system, and we're not even willing to implement the bare minimum. We're not even willing to discuss it on our floor, to have a discussion about it. That's absurd. We have to expand it. A state and a country are represented by how they care about their people, and we are not caring about our lowest citizens, and we have to change that. We can't continue the way we are.
Thank you. Representative Dahl.
It's kind of interesting. We all have different numbers. My number I've heard that we've turned back is $2.8 billion on Medicaid expansion. So I guess whoever you want to talk to, you get the different number from. You know, Medicaid expansion, the reason that I think it has a black eye for a lot of Kansans is because it's Obamacare. But people don't understand that Medicaid expansion is just a small slice of Obamacare. When you talk to all the CEOs, including Garden City Scott Taylor, they all are in favor of Medicaid expansion. Everyone I've talked to, all the groups that deal with like Mosaic and early childhood development of any group want Medicaid expansion. And Zach had mentioned this before, we have not even had hearings on the floor. So everyone I've spoken to have been in favor of Medicaid expansion. I can't say that right now that I'm completely 100% behind Medicaid expansion. But what I want to do is I want to have a hearing on Medicaid expansion, because right now, if I had to vote, because you're only as wise as the information that you have. And every bit of information I have is like what he stated, it's absolutely necessary that we expand Medicaid. There's people out there, the only downfall that I've heard of that why we won't expand Medicaid expansion is because the federal government at some point in time will run out of money. But we have an amendment, the 10th Amendment, is powers reserved to the states. If we have an unfunded mandate, we do not have to follow that mandate. So if the federal government would cut us off, we wouldn't have to continue with Medicaid expansion.
Okay, thank you. Representative Dahl, the next question deals with Medicaid again here.
Good.
A little bit different here. Should Medicaid in Kansas be handled by private for-profit firms as we now have with KanCare? Would privatization be a prudent move with other state-funded programs?
Right now, KanCare, you and I visited a long time about KanCare. KanCare was a very controversial thing coming in. KanCare was to save us all this money. It was a magic bullet. It was going to help along with the tax plan we were going to bring in. It was going to be happy days for everyone. KanCare right now has been a major disappointment. The private aspect that we have, I don't know if you call it private when it's limited to 3 companies. It's limited to 3 companies, and the phone calls I've been getting bad about KanCare have only been about one of those 3 companies. If we want to open it up, perhaps we should open it up. But if we're going to open it up, let's open it up to everyone. Let's not have 3 companies that are for profit doing this. I'm in for anything, innovation that will help save money for the state of Kansas. And they swear that KanCare will save us money. There again, we've been in it 4 years now. We have not saved a dime. So as of right now, I would say let's go back to to make it a government issue until we can find out how we're going to do this and make money and save money. I'm all about saving money, but we're not saving money with the situation we're in right now.
Thank you. More.
This happened at the last event, and it's going to happen this time. Going to beat a dead horse. John's absolutely right. When you privatize things like healthcare, whether you say nonprofit or not, eventually there's somebody there putting a few dollars in their pocket, and they always want a few more. When you allow things to be controlled by government, then their goal is to make sure that everybody is equally taken care of. It's supposed to be their goal, not always the case, and again, that depends on our representatives and who we elect. Our neighbor, Colorado, is about to implement universal health care to its state for all of its citizens. It doesn't matter how much money you make a year, it doesn't matter how many hours of work you do, it doesn't matter how much education you have. If you have a broken arm, if you have pneumonia, you go to the hospital, you get taken care of, and you don't worry about the bill at the end of it, and you don't let that cause you to hesitate. You go in, you pay your copay, and the marijuana and its regulations will pay for itself. Again, I hate to beat a dead horse on it, but there's a state right next door to us, 3 hours from Garden City. It doesn't change anything outside of the distance that you go, and we're missing out of it completely. And if our state representatives don't think that it's not coming back over here, they're wrong. Just look at the immense amount of incarcerations that we've had, the immense amount of pullovers we had with all of the counties that border the state of Colorado. So those counties are making a lot of money on their arrests, but we're just ignoring the taxation that we have sitting right in front of us and wondering why we're struggling. And it doesn't make any sense. It's got to stop.
Thank you. Mr. Ward, water remains a critical issue in western Kansas. What will you do to make it more of a priority with your peers in the legislature?
Our budget has to be the major concern for coming into 2017 and getting things straightened out and back to where they were before. We have to focus on our citizens and the infrastructure of our state. We have to collect taxes from the businesses that have not been paying taxes. These are common sense issues, it feels like. I feel like I don't understand why we continue to dance around this Reaganomic plan that has never shown on any model that it's going to work, and it never will. If you give rich people more money, they're just going to put it away and save it for a rainy day if it ever comes. So by giving the people an increased minimum wage, you would see the ultimate goal of what we wanted to see from the tax cuts. If you give the people who have no money, live paycheck to paycheck, wonder which bills they can afford to pay this week over the next, they're going to pay off their debts, they're going to make improvements to their homes, they're going to buy new cars, they're going to fill up their shopping carts and maybe even grab another one because they can afford to do these things at that point. You know, a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour means you make about $13,000 a year. That means that you take home about just over $200 a week. If those same people that were making $200 a week all of a sudden were making $400, $500 a week, they are not going to squirrel that money away in an offshore bank account. They are going to spend that money in the communities that they work in and they support.
Thank you. Representative Dahl.
Could you repeat, I must have misheard that question or something. Was this dealing with water?
Yeah. Water remains a critical issue in western Kansas. What will you do to make it more of a priority with your
I misheard the
peers
question.
in the
I apologize.
legislature? That's okay.
Well, there's several issues. And water is it's essential, especially for us out here, and it's very, very important. There's several plants, you know, out south of town here, we have this guy who, an inventor, Monty Teeter from Ulysses area. It's called a dragon line. That is, it's a real interesting concept, and I'm real excited to see how that does. That's supposed to save us a ton of water. Second thing we need to look at is the flex plan. The flex plan is if they use, you know, this year we've been blessed. You know, good Lord has turned the faucet on, and we've been able to get a lot of water. Dry land has looked very good. Previous years, you know, the faucet was pretty tight. So this year we're using less water. So perhaps if next year was more of a dry year, we've saved, you have 5 years that you use your allotment, and instead right now if you don't use it, you lose it, and we need to look at the flex plan. Another thing that they're doing in Hoxie, Kansas, for example, is called the Lima Plan. And what it is that a group of farmers in it, they have their own district. And within that district, they can only lose, I think they're using 11 inches of water is what but they set it themselves. And that's what's important. I think when we're dealing with a lot of these issues, it needs to be a volunteer deal. It needs to be something that government stays out of, and they work it out within themselves, and that's very important. And finally, I'm not sure how it is now. Back in the day when I used to teach and coach, in the summertime I hail adjusted, and I went to a corn school, and one kernel of corn that's planted at about 30,000 per acre uses 70 gallons of water, one plant. You know, if you think about that, 30,000 per acre in a 120 acre circle, that's a lot of water. So, you know, if we could get away from corn, get more milo, but, you know, they make so much more money, you know, doing corn. So that's a magic question right there, but it needs to be volunteer as much as possible.
Thank you. Representative Dahl, share your thoughts on political campaigns surrounding the Kansas Supreme Court. Should the justices up for retention keep their positions on the High Court?
You know, this is, boy, did they clobber me during the primary on this thing. You know, we have, I think, one of the most fair ways of picking justices that there is. You know, they want to switch it to the federal level. We have what's called the Missouri plan right now, and we have 9 people who decide. They break it down to 3 judges that goes to the governor, and the governor gets to appoint 1. And they're saying, well, they want to do it like the federal. The governor just picks 1, and then it goes to the Senate for confirmation. You know, and they say, well, it just makes it more fair. I don't know what could be more fair, because when you go to the ballot on November the 8th, you will be able to say yes or no whether you want to retain the Supreme Court justices or not. So I think that the way we're doing it today is something that we need to continue to do. As far as whether I think they should be retained or not, that's a personal question, and I think that's for each person out there to make that own decision for themselves.
While I agree with some of our justices and their decision to make sure we provide adequate education for our children, to make sure we require adequate budgets for our counties, I appreciate them looking out for us in those things, but I can't think of in any other situation where somebody gets to have a permanent guaranteed job. Term limits have to be implemented, because that's how you move on from bad choices that we make as voters. And that's going to be inevitable. And sometimes we will lose good elected officials doing that. But just like a football team at a high school, just because you won the state championship doesn't mean you keep those kids as seniors for the next year to do it again. You have to continue to move on and grow and let new people become leaders with new ideas. And that's how we continue to prosper, is by not remaining stagnant, by moving forward constantly. And we can't do that if we don't have term limits.
Thank you. I have a question here from the audience. Mr. Worf, start with you on this one, please. If you're successful in the election to the Senate, how would you convince other members of the Senate to address the taxing/funding issues, and how would you work with the governor?
Too many people have been willing to work with the governor, and that's why we've gotten to the point where we have not enough people stood up and said, hey, Mr. Brownback, I don't think this is right. I don't think we're considering our citizens in this. And if they have, then they haven't been loud enough. And you see it on C-SPAN all the time. You get it every now and then. You get a congressman up there that'll just go off on everybody. And sometimes I think that's what's needed to shake things up and to stand up and say, I'm not going to let this happen anymore. Somebody has to be a loud voice in this and not be beholden to the people putting money in their pocketbooks, to their lobbyists, to their campaign promises that they made to various people. These are the things that why we elect people on the off years of our governor, so that when our governor isn't doing their job, we can put people in to stop the governor and say enough's enough. And that's exactly what this election is going to turn out to be. Is it's going to be who's going to go to Topeka and say, we're not here to work with you, we're here to stop you.
Thank you.
Well, I adamantly disagree with you have to find a common ground to work. There's, first of all, to get along with your fellow senators. You find, because, you know, if Wichita and the Kansas City area, including Lawrence and such, get together, we can't stop them. They can get whatever they want. Fortunately, though, the Wichita and Lawrence and Kansas City people don't always get along. But you can, it's very important that you develop relationships, and relationships comes with respect. If you show respect and you listen to your fellow senator, you know, at some point in time, the respect comes back. And once you have mutual respect, then that's the starting point of developing a relationship that you can get that all of us there are for the good of Kansas. And when they understand it, that's what you want. You have maybe disagreement on one issue. As far as getting along with the governor, you know, first of all, the governor has 2 years left. You know, and what's going to be real interesting is because there was a big mandate during the primary, and I'm wondering if, again, it could happen again in November. If there's a mandate that shows that, you know, we're disagreeing with the direction that we're going, I think a lot of it, I think the governor's a good man. I'm hoping that he will say, hey, you know, maybe we're going too far, too fast. Maybe I'll back off. And there again, we can't go in there and just try to browbeat him. We've got to go in there and try to work with him. And that's what I hope we all do.
Thank you. I believe we're ready for closing now. Do you have any more questions?
I didn't have any.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Remind you 3 minutes on the closing statement, please.
Well, as I stated earlier, this election is going to be an election that is going to have a large impact on the direction that we're going to go in the state of Kansas. Regardless who's elected, the 2017 budget has already been there. 2017 is going to be a tough year. It's going to be a tough year for Mosaic. It's going to be a tough year for schools. It's going to be a tough year. That's all there is to it. You can't sugarcoat it. That's the way it's going to be. What we can do as senators, as newly elected senators, as a House, is that we can start turning this boat around. So 2018, there's not a magic bullet. Pot isn't a magic bullet. It's not going to turn this thing around. What we have to do. You know, if they want to have hearings on it, that's fine. But right now, if we think we're going to turn it around in a year, or if there's a magic bullet out there, that's not right. It's not going to happen. That's not reality. The reality of it is it's going to take some time, and we have to work together. And I think, like I said earlier, everybody wants to have a better state, and they want to do what's right for the state. And I think we show respect. We work together, the Democrats, the Republicans, the moderates, the conservatives, and everyone work together for the betterment of the state. And we share ideas, and we don't just close the door like what's happened the last 4 years that I was there in the House. Then we can make the state great again, because this will be a great state. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
Thank you. Mr. Warren.
I want to thank the chamber for inviting me to be here. This whole election cycle has been an absolutely phenomenal roller coaster. I have learned so much, met a lot of great people. And this next part, I didn't write it. I didn't put it on my computer. I wanted to make sure it came from the heart. I joined this election because I was terrified of the current administration. I joined it because I couldn't do 4 more years of what we already did, having 2 children that are in school and having a governor that didn't care about education and wasn't concerned about our education budgets. I started this campaign to make sure that I could always be honest and say what I would say if I was in front of my mom, and say what I would say if I was with my friends. And in maintaining that honesty, there's a candidate that is far more prepared. There's a candidate that has been in this for a long time, and that candidate's not me. John Dahl and I have done several of these events together, and it's been an absolute honor to sit on equal ground with him, but we're not equal. He's far more prepared to do this than I am, and I am so honored to say John Dahl will be the 39th senator of our district, the 39th district senator. I humbly stand down from my position. Thank you.
This evening, we'd like to thank Representative Dahl and Zach Bork for being here. We really appreciate that. We'd like again thank the City of Garden City for televising this tonight. Steve, do you have anything else? I'd like to thank the Garden City Area Chamber of Commerce for putting this together. And ladies and gentlemen, have a good evening. There's a debate on here, on TV here shortly, right?
Is that an important one?
Nah.
That's the undercard.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. Appreciate it.